This is Mike Rickards, and I'm back here with Dunstan McNichol. You were walking us down history,
there we go.
history's lane a little bit, and I just wanted to go back. The first episode, I guess, was the decision made during the Florio administration to go from using these assets and its so-called book value to the actual value.
Yeah.
The result was it created hundreds of millions of dollars of, quote, excess revenue that nobody knew we had.
Yes, it did.
Is that bad? I mean, shouldn't we all be at a true value when we're talking about our assets?
I don't think it's a bad thing to accurately mark your assets to what they are actually worth. Where the bad part comes in is when you say, look, on paper, we just had a windfall. Let's spend it. And that is what happened in the Florio administration. And the Florio administration was also in a recession. They were looking for money anywhere they could find it. They have their famous selling a highway to themselves and using that money to balance the budget. They found money here by recalculating the value of the pension fund and then chopping off the part that looked like it was excess on paper and using that in the state budget. They actually can't take money out of the pension fund directly. They have to head it off before it gets to the pension fund.
So they just stopped contributions.
They stopped making their required contributions. So then we've moved into the Whitman administration, and the economy has turned around, and the pension fund is doing better. They made a series of changes that are way more technical than I understand, but it was my first exposure to seeing the pension fund used as part of the budget and to having to cover the pension fund. But they changed the way they calculate how much each employee has accrued in ultimate benefits, which lowered the amount they needed to put in each year. They and then they made a series of other changes. Stock market didn't do what they thought it was going to do, and they suddenly realized they didn't have enough money in the pension fund. So in 1997, they said that there was a $2.8 billion shortfall in the pension system. And rather than prevail on today's taxpayers to make up that difference, they were going to borrow $2.8 billion over 30 years, deposit that $2.8 billion in the pension fund, and bring it up to 100%. They did that. They barely did that. It was a vote that hardly made it through the Senate, but it eventually passed. They issued the bonds. They deposited the money. Payments to the tune of $200 million a year continue to be made on those bonds. Pension fund hit 100% funded valuation, and the legislature got approached by various unions saying, hey, there's so much money in the pension system, I think you should step up our benefits. And the way they did that is they changed the benefit calculation, the way an individual's benefits are calculated. You used to divide the number of years you worked by 60. They changed that to the number of years you worked divided by 55, which amounts to increasing your benefit by 9%. That was expensive to do for people currently working. To change the formula for people who are already enrolled in the system, that would have cost about $2.5 billion. They went a step farther, and they changed it retroactively for everyone who is currently collecting a benefit. So every pension check went up by 9% overnight for hundreds of thousands of retired pension recipients. That pumped the cost of it to $5.8 billion. The legislature unfortunately approved this bill in late, it's 2000, I believe. It was the peak, proved to be the absolute peak of the stock market in the dot-com bubble era. In order to finance that $5 billion cost, they changed around the formula that estimates how much the pension fund is worth again. And instead of, you're supposed to average your stock market gains over 5 years and just use basically 20% of any 1 year's gain. They decided to stop the 5 years at the point that proved to be the peak of the stock market, declare that as the true value of the pension fund, And then, lo and behold, they had $5 billion extra to spend. They chopped it off. They used it to pay for the benefit enhancement, and the fund moved forward. The stock market collapsed. Oh, they also said, since we're fully funded, there's no reason for us to be putting our annual contributions in.
Was the investment council involved in that, or just the legislature?
No, that's strictly the legislature making those calls. The investment council is only involved in determining however much money is in the system at a given time, what areas of the market and
it'll be invested in.
It should be placed in. Yeah. So the end result was the stock market collapsed. The state didn't get to average the collapse out over 5 years, and they had already spent the gains they had made on paper in the stock market. So they quickly went from being 109% funded to being about 85% funded in the course of 2 years.
Did anybody warn that this was a bad stroke at that time?
Lots of people warned that this was a bad stroke. And there are, the OLS put out a report to the Senate Budget Committee telling them this could, the Office of Legislative Services. They provide background information on policy questions to the legislature.
Right.
They spelled out the downside of this. And in fact, by the time the bill got passed, the stock market had already started to go into decline, and the OLS report pointed out that you're spending money that doesn't exist anymore. It's those paper gains are gone.
What about the Supreme Court? Now, they were involved in part of this decision?
The Supreme Court's, I don't believe they were involved in this.
Were they involved in the loaning?
A question came up about whether or not the benefits that are promised to employees are a contractual right that has to be honored, or a policy issue that can be changed. But I don't think that made it to the Supreme Court.
Good. We'll come back to discussion of pensions in New Jersey. Thank you.